Welcome back, everyone. Get ready, because today we're diving deep into a really pivotal period in Indian history, a 50-year stretch from 1707 to 1757.
It's fascinating, isn't it? You've provided us with such an interesting mix of sources, economic histories, combined with regional studies, gives us a real feel for what life was like back then.
Definitely. We were talking major change, like the ground was shifting beneath everyone's feet. And it all seemed to kick off with a pretty significant event in 1707, the death of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb.
That's right. It's like that was the catalyst, The empire had been weakening for a while, and Aurangzeb's death was like pulling the rug out from under it.
Yeah, I see what you mean. It creates this power vacuum. So what happens? Who rushes in to fill the void?
Well, you had regional powers who'd been growing stronger, kind of waiting in the wings. They saw their opportunity and took it, challenging the Mughal authority head on.
Kind of like everyone was waiting for the main event to be over, and then it was a free-for-all.
Exactly. And to add fuel to the fire, you had these external pressures, too, major invasions that further weakened the Mughals.
Oh, right, like Nader Shah from Persia
Yeah.
in 1739.
That's the one. He sacks Delhi, which was the heart of the Mughal Empire. It was a huge blow to their prestige and really demonstrated their vulnerability.
And then the Afghans, too, right?
Yeah, throughout the 1750s, they kept making incursions, chipping away at the empire even more.
So you've got this imploding empire, ambitious regional powers, and these outside forces stirring the pot. It's a recipe for chaos. So who are the big winners in all this? Which regional powers really came out on top?
Well, two groups really stand out, the Sikhs in the northwest and the Marathas down south. They'd both been gaining power for a while, and when the Mughal Empire started crumbling, they were ready to seize their chance.
Makes sense. It's like survival of the fittest, I guess.
Yeah.
But it can't just be about the big players, right? How did all of this political turmoil affect everyday people? I'm especially thinking about farmers and those in rural areas.
You're absolutely right. And that's where the economic histories become so important. They tell a story of widespread agrarian distress during this period. Farmers were dealing with a whole bunch of problems. Wars disrupted their fields and harvests. Land ownership was changing, which created uncertainty. And to top it all off, agricultural production was really unpredictable.
Yeah, it sounds like they were getting hit from all sides.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about those changing land ownership patterns? What was happening there?
It was a real shift. They were moving away from that traditional system of rewarding loyalty with land grants.
Right, I remember reading about that. So what replaced it?
It was this new, more complex system, and integrative polity, they called it. It was all about these intricate alliances and obligations that determined who owned what land and how taxes were collected.
Sounds complicated. I bet it made things difficult for farmer.
It definitely did. They often got caught in the middle of all these changes with their livelihoods at stake.
Makes you realize how vulnerable people were back then. At the mercy of political powers, economic shifts, and on top of all that, the forces of nature.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of nature, our sources mention a pretty significant event that must have caused even more hardship. The Kosi River in Bihar changed its course.
Ah, the Kosi River. Even today, it's known for being unpredictable. What kind of impact did that have back then?
It caused massive flooding. We're talking widespread devastation, farmland wiped out, and people forced to flee their homes.
It's like one thing after another. Political turmoil, economic instability, and then this major environmental disaster.
Yeah.
You can see why this period was so pivotal. It really set the stage for what was to come.
Exactly. All these events really strained the available resources. And that brings us to another big theme that comes up in the sources, the whole issue of resource management.
Right, it makes sense. If the Mughals are declining and all these regional powers are vying for control, there's going to be intense competition for land, water, anything valuable.
You're absolutely right. It wasn't just internal competition either. This quest for resources was playing out on a global stage too. The pepper trade with Rome is a perfect example.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about that. The Romans were crazy for pepper, weren't they? So how did that impact resource management within India?
Well, India had a monopoly on spices, and pepper was in huge demand in Rome. That demand drove this continuous flow of goods and precious metals, especially gold, into India.
It's always about the gold, isn't it? But I imagine that this demand for gold, this constant trade, must have had some downsides for India.
It definitely did. To meet the demand, they had to clear land for cultivation, and forests were sacrificed to fuel the growth of big cities like Mumbai, Kolkata, and even Delhi back then.
It's crazy to think how something like the Roman desire for pepper could have such a ripple effect across the world.
And it highlights something really important, how interconnected the world already was, even back then. But, while all this economic activity was going on, the real story, the human story, is about how people's lives were changing. The social fabric of India itself was undergoing a major transformation.
That's right. We're not just talking about politics and economics. We're talking about people's lives, their identities, their communities. What were some of the major societal shifts that were taking place?
Well, the decline of the Mughal Empire, which had dominated for so long, really shook things up. The old social hierarchies were challenged, and new groups started to gain prominence.
So who are these new groups?
You see the rise of these powerful religious movements, the Sikhs and the Marathas particularly, who are really shaping social and political identities.
So religion was becoming an even more powerful force. And it wasn't just religious identities that were evolving, right? You mentioned cultural changes too.
Exactly. This period sees a flourishing of regional languages and literature like Marathi and Bengali. They start to challenge the dominance of Sanskrit, which really reflects the growing cultural diversity and regionalization that was happening.
So India's cultural landscape was becoming even richer and more vibrant. But I can't help but wonder, amid all this change, were there also some tensions bubbling beneath the surface?
You're right to ask that. Change like this always comes with its challenges. And there were definitely some underlying tensions that emerged during this period, especially between different religious communities. Yeah, those tensions, they were part of the story too. It wasn't all just about new identities and cultural mixing. As those nationalist movements, like the Hindu Mahasabha, gained more traction, the friction between Hindus and Muslims intensified.
That's really interesting. So even with all this cultural growth, things weren't exactly peaceful. It kind of foreshadows what would eventually happen, doesn't it?
Exactly. It highlights the fact that even as things change, those old divisions and conflicts, they can linger, resurface. Even amidst all that innovation, some wounds don't heal easily.
It's a good reminder, for sure. But I wanted to go back to something you mentioned earlier about the rise of those regional identities. I'm curious, did that regionalization, did it show up in other ways besides language and literature? Like in art and architecture, maybe?
Oh, absolutely. This was a period where you see distinct regional styles of art and architecture emerging. The Deccan region is a great example. They developed from the northern Nagra style and the southern Javida style.
So that's like the architecture itself was a reflection of all that cultural mixing happening across India.
Exactly. And it wasn't just happening organically either. A lot of it was driven by the patronage of those powerful regional rulers. They really wanted to establish their own distinct cultural identity separate from the Mughals.
Well, yeah, it makes sense. If you're trying to solidify your power, to legitimize your rule, what better way than to create these grand monuments and buildings?
Right. It's a statement. Think back to the mosque Babur built in Panipat after he defeated the Lodi Sultan. It wasn't just a religious building. It was a symbol of Mughal power, a way of projecting their cultural influence. And as the Mughals started losing their grip, those regional rulers, they started commissioning their own architectural marvels.
Each one trying to outdo the other, I bet.
Probably. But, each structure reflected their own specific tastes and ambitions, whether it was these opulent palaces or these incredible temples.
So they serve both a practical, religious purpose and a symbolic one, a way of expressing their regional pride and power.
Exactly. But, this regionalization wasn't all positive. While it did create this rich cultural tapestry, it also contributed to those growing tensions we were talking about.
So it was a bit of a mixed bag then.
Yeah.
On one hand, you have this amazing explosion of cultural expression, but on the other, you have these increasing conflicts between regions.
That's it, exactly. It created this much more fragmented political landscape where everyone's jostling for power and resources, and it's all playing out against the backdrop of these new religious identities we discussed. It was a volatile mix, and the tension was especially noticeable between the Mughals and those up-and-coming regional powers.
Like the Marathas, for example.
Precisely. They started out as Mughal officials, remember, but they gradually expanded their influence, eventually challenging the Mughals directly.
Talk about a power move. But was it just a struggle for political control? Or were there deeper ideological differences fueling the conflict?
Oh, definitely. The Marathas, inspired by figures like Shivaji, they were pushing for a Hindu Padshahi, basically, a Hindu kingdom, which of course went against the whole idea of the Mughal Empire, which was a more centralized, multi-religious state.
So you've got this clash of visions for India, which just added another layer of complexity to those already existing religious tensions. It makes you wonder if there was any chance of finding common ground.
It's a big question, isn't it? And then to make matters even more complicated, you have the arrival of the European powers,
Yeah.
like the French and the British.
Right. They couldn't resist getting involved.
No, they couldn't. And they were happy to take advantage of all these internal divisions, playing different sides against each other and just gradually expanding their own influence.
It's the classic divide and conquer strategy. They were setting the stage for colonialism, weren't they? It's like a domino effect, one event leading to the next, shaping the entire subcontinent. But let's take a step back for a second and revisit that intellectual and religious energy we touched upon earlier. We talked about those movements like the Sikhs and the Marathas, but it seems like there's more to uncover there.
Absolutely. There was this resurgence of interest in those ancient Indian texts and philosophical traditions. For instance, the Bhakti movement, which emphasized a more personal connection with the divine. It really resonated with people across different regions and communities.
It's like people were seeking something to hold on to amidst all that chaos and uncertainty. So was this just a Hindu thing? Or were other religious traditions experiencing a similar revival?
Oh, no, not at all. Buddhism was still very much alive and influential, particularly the Mahayana school. We even see the works of scholars like Nagarjuna, who wrote a profound commentary on the Katushataka, being translated into Chinese by the famous traveler and monk Xuanzang.
Wow, just imagine that. These ideas were traveling across borders, connecting India to the rest of the world. It's kind of like the pepper trade we talked about earlier. It's not just about economics, it's about sharing cultures and exchanging ideas.
Exactly. It's a reminder that even with all the internal turmoil, India was still this vibrant center of intellectual and spiritual activity. Despite everything, people remained curious, connected to the world around them. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've looked at the rise of regional identities, the clash of ideologies, this religious and intellectual ferment, and that constant influence of external forces. What are your thoughts? What's the bigger picture emerging from all this?
It really is remarkable. Despite all that upheaval, this period laid the groundwork for the India we know today. It was a time of immense change, both destructive and creative, where new identities were forged, new power structures arose, and new ideas began to take root.
So it was more than just a transition period. It was like a genesis, a time when the seeds of modern India were sown. Makes you wonder how those seeds grew and developed over the centuries.
Exactly. And to understand India's journey, we need to consider those seeds. Take the rise of regional identities we've discussed. They played such a crucial role in shaping that linguistic and cultural diversity that makes India so unique today. Right. It's like a garden where all these different flowers are blooming,
Yeah,
creating this vibrant tapestry.
a perfect analogy. But even gardens have their challenges, right? You have to deal with weeds, pests, competition for resources.
And those challenges, they can mirror the issues that societies face.
Absolutely. While that diversity we talked about is a source of strength, it can also be a source of tension. The friction between different regions and communities, which we saw emerging during this period, it continues to shape India today. It's like a reminder that history's impact can echo for centuries.
It's a sobering thought. It really drives home the importance of studying this period. It's not just some bygone era, it's the foundation on which the present is built.
Mm.
So if we were to boil down what we've learned today, what will be the key takeaways? What can we learn from this turbulent yet transformative chapter of Indian history?
One of the biggest takeaways for me is the importance of adaptability. This was an era defined by constant change, shifting power dynamics, and unpredictable events. Individuals and communities had to adapt to survive.
Those who could adjust, who could ride the waves of change, they were the ones who thrived.
Precisely. And this adaptability wasn't limited to the political sphere. We saw it in culture and intellectual thought. There was this constant blending of influences, this fusion of ideas as different traditions came together.
A cultural melting pot in a way.
Exactly. And while that sometimes led to friction, ultimately it contributed to the richness and resilience of Indian society. But adaptability is just one piece of the puzzle. Another key takeaway for me is the lasting impact of those historical legacies. The decisions made, the actions taken, and the ideas embraced during this period, they're still shaping India today.
We can't escape our history, can we?
No, we can't. And that's why it's so important to study it, to understand it, because it reminds us that we have a responsibility to make choices that will lead to a better future.
It's a powerful message. We're not just passive observers of history, we're active participants in shaping it.
Absolutely. And that brings us to what I believe is the most crucial takeaway from all of this, the importance of perspective. As we've seen, history is complex. It's a tapestry woven from so many different threads. To truly understand it, we need to examine it from multiple angles, consider different viewpoints, and acknowledge how interconnected everything really is.
It's like holding a multifaceted gem up to the light. Each facet reveals a different aspect of its beauty and complexity.
Beautifully put. As we continue to explore history, let's approach it with that sense of curiosity, with empathy, and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions. It's in understanding the past that we can better navigate the present and build a more informed and inclusive future.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into such a pivotal period of Indian history. We hope you've gained new insights, a deeper understanding of the forces that shape the India we know today. But the journey of discovery doesn't stop here. Think about how those early shifts played out in the long run. How did those economic and social upheavals, those seeds of change, grow and transform India over the centuries? We encourage you to continue exploring, to keep asking questions, and to delve even deeper into the rich and ever-unfolding story of India. Until next time, keep seeking knowledge, keep learning, and keep exploring.